Hello, sophomores. I realize this is a little weird, maybe a little awkward, but today's lesson was so important and I didn't want to fall behind, and I want to make sure we get through everything we need to get through before spring break. So, we're going to do a lesson via video. And if you haven't figured it out already from your journal prompts, today's lesson is about beauty. I told you last class that my goal with this poetry unit is not so much for you to know a ton about poetry and all the terminology and things like that that go along with poetry, but that you're able to see the beauty that is in poetry. And so today's topic is going to be beauty. If you look on your note guides, as I go through these things, there's going to be certain things you need to fill in. You're going to turn these in at the end of class. It's going to count as a quiz grade, so make sure you do your best. All right? So today's topic is beauty, and if we're going to talk about beauty, we have to first talk about the transcendentals. As Catholics, we believe that there are three transcendentals, and I'm going to get to what those are in a minute. But what does it mean to be a transcendental? Well, if you look at the word transcend, we're talking about rising above. We're talking about something being outside of any individual thing. So the definition of a transcendental is a property of being that some things have and other things don't. The three transcendentals in Catholic tradition are truth, beauty, and goodness. So the basic idea here is that all things that are true have a certain quality about them that goes outside of the individual true thing. All things that are beautiful have a certain quality about them that unites them. All things that are good have a certain quality about them that ties them together, that makes them part of the same thing. And so that's what we mean by transcendentals. We mean that truth, beauty, and goodness are these properties that are in certain things and are the same in each of the things that contain them. So, to review, some things are true and other things are not. And if a statement or an idea is true, then it contains the transcendental truth. It contains that property that we call truth. And that property of truth is something that is the same in all true things. It's the same with beauty and goodness, okay? So hopefully that makes sense. It's these three things that we want, that our souls desire. Because these three properties that some things in this world have are three properties of God. And our hearts, as St. Augustine says, our hearts are restless until they rest in God. So we desire truth, we desire beauty, we desire goodness. If you think back to Mr. Aranda and Mr. D'Amico talking on sophomore retreat, you remember what they said about truth. They talked about how we all desire truth, and they kind of went at it from the angle of no one likes to be lied to. When we're lied to, we react negatively against that because our hearts desire truth. Truth is defined as that which corresponds to reality. Okay? So if I take this guitar tuner here, I've got this guitar tuner, okay? And I say this guitar tuner is behind my back. That would be an untrue statement because it doesn't correspond to reality. What is real is that this guitar tuner is right in front of me, in my hand, not behind my back at all. So that statement doesn't have the quality of truth about it. It doesn't correspond to reality. Beauty, on the other hand, is the first definition I'm going to give you of it is that which, upon being perceived, pleases. Okay? So truth is that which corresponds to reality, and beauty is that which, upon being perceived, pleases. All right? So that's why we say a sunset is beautiful, and that's why it has beauty in it, because it's pleasing. That's why we say the mountains are beautiful and the ocean is beautiful, because it's pleasing when we perceive it, when we hear it, when we smell it, when we see it. And so all things that are beautiful have that quality that they please upon being perceived. And then goodness is that which brings us into relationship with the other. Actually, check that. Goodness is that which brings us into right relationship. Because sometimes things that are good will bring us into right relationship with ourselves. Okay? So, truth is something that ideas and statements have or don't have. Beauty is something that objects or persons or places have or don't have. And goodness is something that actions have or don't have. Okay, so those are the three transcendentals. And those are the three things that our hearts seek. When we are looking at objects, when we are listening to ideas, when we are perceiving people, when we are going to places, whenever we're doing anything, really what we're trying to do is grasp at those three transcendentals, experience them. We want to experience truth, beauty, and goodness. So let's pause there and make sure that you have the notes that I want you to have so far. Okay? A transcendental is a quality of being that something either has or doesn't have. And the three transcendentals are truth, beauty, and goodness. Truth, which is defined as that which corresponds to reality. Beauty, which is defined as that which, upon being perceived, pleases. And goodness is which is defined as that which brings us into right relationship. Okay? Now, why are we talking about all this? Well, because we're talking about poetry. And good poetry is poetry that contains beauty. Art is one of the main ways that we experience beauty. We experience it in people, and I'll get to that in a bit. We experience it in places. We experience it in things around us. But there is little that pleases like good art does, like good movies, like good television, like good paintings, like good photographs, like good sculptures. And poetry is one of those ways that we can experience beauty most easily because we're surrounded by it all the time. Okay? So, that's why we're talking about the transcendentals in the first place, and that's why we're especially going to focus today on beauty. Okay, so what does St. Thomas Aquinas say about beauty? Well, I've got pulled up here a website that talks about his definition of beauty, part of which we already talked about. St. Thomas Aquinas says, if you look at the end of that first paragraph, that beauty is that which pleases upon being seen, and we've already said that. But when we get a little bit deeper into Aquinas's ideas of beauty, we see that beauty has three different qualities. And if we look here at the paragraph called "The Splendor of Beauty," we see the three qualities. And read along with me. It says, St. Thomas offers us another important insight into the nature of beauty when he informs us of the three elements that constitute it. Beauty, for the angelic doctor, includes unity, proportion, and clarity. The traditional notion that beauty is diversity within unity is an integration of the first two of these three elements. The third, however, claritas, is the most elusive of that triad. The American Thomistic philosopher Mortimer Adler renders the word claritas as effulgence, a flowing out from the beautiful object to the perceiver. It is a kind of radiance or splendor which cannot be reduced to anything that is scientifically analyzable. Beauty confers delight through its shining clarity, this je ne sais quoi, I know not what, that separates the beautiful from the mundane. So, the three elements for St. Thomas Aquinas that make something beautiful are unity, proportion, and clarity. And we're going to talk about those three here in just a second. Okay, so unity, proportion, and clarity are the three properties of beauty. The other definition that I want you to take down is that beauty is diversity within unity. So when we look at those things, what does it mean? Well, the idea of unity and proportion, those two things kind of go hand in hand. The idea is that the sum total of all the parts of it works as one whole thing, and each one of the parts works in its place. Okay? So, to use an example, we would say that, I talked about the mountains earlier, we would say that people building stuff on the sides of mountains takes away from its beauty, because it breaks up that unity that is the mountains. It sticks something in there that doesn't belong. And so those ski ranges and all that stuff, while it allows us to ski and have fun, it does take something away from the beauty of those mountains, because it puts something in there that doesn't belong. So the ski range, the ski resort, is not in proportion to the rest of the mountains, and it doesn't fit in with it. The part doesn't fit with the whole. Here's another, maybe a more clear example. I have my guitar here, right? And guitar chords, some work, some don't. Right? One is more beautiful than the other. This G is beautiful. It's beautiful because it pleases us when we hear it. But it's also beautiful because, one, all of the parts fit together to one whole. That chord sounds good on its own, but also each one of the notes fits in its own place. Each part of it works, and it works as a whole thing. Each part of it works, and it works as a whole thing. So that's what unity and proportion means. The parts and the whole work together. It's different things put together so that they work as one. That is something of an objective idea. It either does or it doesn't. It doesn't much matter what you think or what I think. It's something that we can talk about objectively. So when we say beauty is in the eye of the beholder, well, not really. Beauty is something that that things have or they don't have. And they have them when all the parts work together as a whole, and each one of the parts plays its own part well. Different parts, diversity, one thing, unity. Diversity within unity, just like a guitar chord. The third part, claritas, is the most important part, but also the most difficult one to talk about. Essentially, it means that beautiful things move us. They make us feel certain ways. We experience them, and they impact us. And that is more of a subjective idea. It could depend on the person. But by and large, it doesn't. Those things that move people move all people, or at least all people whose hearts are open to beauty. Nobody looks at a sunset and wants to throw up. Nobody goes to the oceans and to the ocean and thinks, I'd rather look at a rock. Nobody looks at a Kauffman Stadium and thinks, oh man, that's disgusting, right? Beautiful things move people, and each of the parts fits within it. And so that which is beautiful no matter who's looking at it. It's a quality that the thing has, not something that we add on to it by what we think. Okay? So when we're looking at these poems, I want you to remember that. Even if you don't necessarily like them or aren't moved by them, it's probably because your heart and your intellect need a little sharpening, need a little preparation to be ready for these poems. That's why we learn about poetry. That's why we learn about art before we go and perceive it, because you need to be open to the beauty that's there. All right? So if at first you're not moved by these poems, it's not the end of the world. What we want to start with is looking at that proportion and that unity, and see if we can see those two parts. And then maybe next class, when I'm back there, maybe we can worry about whether it moves us or not. All right? So, what I want to do now is look at a piece of Catholic tradition that's really beautiful poetry, and that's Psalm 23. Okay? So let's read Psalm 23 together. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He restores my soul. He guides me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You have anointed my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and loving kindness will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Right now at your pods, I want you to read through this again. See if I can get it all on the screen there at the same time. Read through it again, and I want you to talk about what makes this beautiful. What is it about this that's beautiful? Dutch, get to work. Just messing with you. If it's fourth hour, Braxton, put your hand down. I'll answer your questions later. No, seriously, guys, get to work. One more minute to talk about this in your groups. One more minute. Start to wrap up the discussions and write down your answers. Okay, hopefully that was enough time. If it wasn't, substitute teacher, feel free to pause me and give them as much time as they need. At this point, I want you to find another psalm that you think is beautiful. I just want you understand. I want you to understand that poetry is a very human thing. It's something that's happened for thousands of years, and it's a true expression of the desires of the human heart. And I think it's really important that you understand that that the Catholic Church has a rich history in poetry. I talked a little bit about how earlier in the year about how Shakespeare was Catholic, and there are many other great Catholic poets. But from the Jewish tradition, from the Old Testament, there's some really beautiful poetry in Genesis, but especially the Psalms. The Psalms are all they're songs. They're songs. They're poem songs, right? Which is kind of a combination of those words is where you get psalm from. So I want you to hop online and you make sure you use the new American Bible translation and look through the Psalms and find one that you find particularly beautiful, and copy down a couple verses of it on your sheet, and then ask your class or your pod mates which ones they found, and tell me which psalms they picked. Maybe even take your psalm or one of theirs to prayer at some point this week. But right now, just find a psalm that you think is beautiful, and share it with your classmates, with your pod mates, and write down what they picked. Substitute teacher, go ahead and pause me at this point and give them as much time as they need, probably about 4 minutes or so. Okay, see you in a minute. Okay, hopefully you found some good stuff in there. I think at this point, if it's third hour, I think this is the point in class where I tell Josh Lewis to spit his gum out. And also, Ramsey, stop doing whatever you're doing. If it's fourth hour, Raven Burdett, stop smiling. And let's see what else. Mitchell, quiet. For real. Okay, great. I want you to get out the poems that you were assigned now. If you weren't here last class or you don't have your poem with you, look off somebody else's. But I want you to do the same thing you just did with that psalm, which is take this idea of beauty being unity, proportion, and claritas, or clarity. I want you to take that idea and apply it to the poem that you were given. Tell me how it's a demonstration of unity. Tell me how the individual parts are in proportion to one another. And if you feel moved by it, describe that. Okay? So look at the poem that you were assigned, and I want you to analyze the beauty of it right now on your sheet of paper. Okay? And substitute, you can pause me for a little bit and give them about 5 minutes to do this. Thanks. Okay, so hopefully today we've learned about the transcendentals. We've learned about truth, beauty, and goodness, but most especially beauty. And we've learned about what Aquinas says beauty is, and we've tried to apply that to at least 3 different things: Psalm 23, the psalm you found, and the poem that you were assigned. But the best question you can be asking right now is, why does this matter so much? Why does it matter that we see this beauty? And especially for us as Catholics, why does it matter? And this is what I really want you to understand from the day, is that sharing things like poetry and art and music, sharing things that are beautiful, is perhaps the most powerful way to show them God. Father Robert Barron talks about this really beautifully. He talks about the game of baseball, and he says that no little kid signs up for baseball because they hear the truth about baseball, because they have somebody sit them down and explain all the rules to them, and explain how innings work, and explain how strikes work, and explain the infield fly rule. It's not the truth, usually. It's not the truth that draws somebody to something, but the beauty of it. The thing that makes kids want to play baseball, or any sport really for that matter, is that they see the beauty of the game. They're moved by it. They see the proportion and the unity of whatever this is, whether it's baseball or something else, and they want to understand it. So beauty is important, and us sharing beauty in all its various forms, whether it be poetry or art or sports or our own personal talents, is so important, because beauty is what moves people to seek truth. Their experience of something makes them want to learn about it. And then they come into relationship with it. And oddly enough, this year of faith is love it, learn it, live it, right? Or is it? I think I got that right. Regardless, maybe I got the order wrong. But we're moved by something then we want to learn about it, and then we come into relationship with it, or we start living it, right? So that's why beauty is so important. It's so important because it's what brings people to God. It's what makes them want to seek truth. And so if we're not sharing beauty with the world, then then evangelization is never going to happen. And this is the last point. And I said earlier in this video that I was going to talk about the beauty of persons, and that's the last thing I want to end on, is that the human person is what we consider the most beautiful thing in the world. It's the pinnacle of creation. And when we share ourselves with each other, and I don't mean necessarily in a physical sense, but when we share who we are, who our soul is, that's a beauty that moves people regardless. And so beauty for the human person isn't just physical. All right, I talked about that which upon being perceived pleases. And there is physical beauty, sure, and that's in greater or lesser degrees. But for instance, I'm more beautiful than Mr. Aranda. But beauty for the person is also about their soul. It's about who they are, and that is a beauty that every human person has. And when we share who we are with each other, that's what moves people towards the truth, towards wanting to seek to understand God and to seek to live in relationship with Him. So that's why beauty is so important. We can share beauty in a number of ways. Art is one of the easiest and most accessible ways. But ultimately, the sharing of who we are and our personhood is the most beautiful thing that we can share with others. So do that. That's your homework. And next class, we're going to read a couple of World War I poems, and I'm going to talk about World War I poetry in particular, and talk about how beautiful it is and why there was so much of it. If there's time left over, which there probably is, this would be a great chance to work on your poetry project. All right? Thanks.